All right, Pez fans, welcome back to another preview. This week we are looking ahead to the Tour of Flanders, de Ronde. And if you're lucky enough, like me, you may have scored yourself one of these awesome, authentic, and official hats, which I did get roadside, although it was at Paris-Roubaix, but I was in Belgium at the time. And then, of course, you can't really be a true fan of Flanders without the Lion of Flanders flag in the background, so we're keeping that close by all week. And joining me in studio once again, Chris Horner, to talk about what it's like from the rider's perspective. So we're going to have some interesting chat. Chris, thanks for joining us. Pleasure to have you back on the program.
Thanks for having me back on again, Richard. It was fun last week doing it, and of course we got the big ones. The big one-day race is coming up on Sunday.
I have been, and I know Pez fans have been anticipating these races. April for us is one of our biggest months of racing coverage, anticipation, going to the spring classics. We look forward to it so much. As a rider, from your perspective, what was it like? The riders, are you guys anticipating? How do you anticipate spring? What is it sort of like from the rider's side?
Well, of course, you got to remember I was there in the 90s. And so we're talking about 97, 98, 99, when I first started doing these big one-day classics when I was with FDJ. So I kind of experienced the classics almost identical as you explained it, Richard, where coming from the U.S., I grew up in San Diego, California. Sunny, nice, beautiful weather. And then I get signed on to FDJ to come over for 1997. But we didn't have the internet in 1997, right? It came a long time before that. We were still doing everything by fax. So when I first got over there, I didn't exactly know what Tour of Flanders, Paris-Roubaix, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, Amstel Gold. I didn't understand the whole magnitude of how big it was, especially Flanders coming up on this Sunday when we're talking about in Belgium. There was no build-up to the classics like there is now. With the internet, with all the bike racing that we have, with the coverage you're doing here on Pez, with all the different Flow bikes, GCN, Max, Peacock, you can watch every race you want, and then you can go on YouTube and find all this kind of content like we're bringing the viewers right now. So that's what's helping this with this buildup. So remember, when I was over there first in 97, I didn't see it until I got there. I arrived there and the cars are pulling up. We didn't have buses then, right? We had wagons. Everyone had a station wagon, right? So we pull up in the wagon, you pop the hatch, we'd climb out of the seats, and a lot of times, Richard, you couldn't open the door because the fans were so pushed in tight on the cars that as you're trying to get out of the car, the fans have to move so the doors can open after we've parked, because they see the cars coming in and all the fans, there wasn't VIP stuff then. All the fans are allowed to go anywhere. You pull the car in, you kind of push out, you get to the back of the bumper, and you're signing autographs while the soigneur is putting hot oil on your legs and stuff because, like you said, it was cold and miserable. But it was always cold. It was never like sunshine and beautiful. And a lot of times, of course, it was wet and cold. So we're sitting on the back of the bumper. It's cold out. Your shorts are pulled up. You don't have your leg warmers on or anything like that. The soigneur's massaging you up with a bunch of hot oil, and then you're getting ready to go. And that was my first real experience of coming into these classic races here like Flanders and a lot of the earlier seasons that we've already seen, like E3 and Wevelgem and all that kind of stuff.
Did your teammates give you a little bit of Cole's notes on here's what's coming or what to expect? Or were you just thrown in and it's like, holy smokes, what am I doing here? Your first time riding Flanders, what was that like?
First off, you're like, what was it like the first time? The first time, I didn't even know where I was, right? You know you're in Belgium, but you don't know where you are. It was a different world not being prepared like the U.S. kids getting over there that are going to race here on Sunday. When I first went over, since I was viewing it for the first time, and remember, I'm on a French team. I don't speak French fluently. Of course, in the hotel the night before when we're having the meeting, I remember one meeting, I don't remember which year it was, but I was with Max Giandri, and he's explaining to how important it was to be at this right turn at this moment with this house that had the red door. I mean, it's like, we're going to come down this street. We're going to be 150K into the race. There's going to be a house with a red door, and you're going to make a right turn. When you make the right turn, it's all cobbles everywhere, but there's a smooth path for like 200 meters on the right. And then as soon as that 200 meters is gone, if we go in there first and I'm on your wheel, I want you to jump from the right, and I want you to go to the left, because now it's smoother on the left side of the road. So if we can get into this turn first, make the right, stay all the way to the right. Then 200 meters later, jump over to the left, because it's going to be a smoother. That's how well riders like Max Chiandri had known the course. He was explaining it to me during the race at the hotel the night before, like you asked. No, not really. I still didn't grasp the importance of these one-day races. And to go back to explain to you how little I knew when I was starting Flanders, my experience going into these classics, I didn't even understand that they're using the same roads. That's how little bit of preparation I had coming into it.
And so when you got into that race, and then at the end of it, did you feel like, okay, I'm getting it now, or was it sort of like, what just happened?
What just happened? Yeah, what just happened? One year, Richard, we had the meeting in the bus or in the hotel the night before. That morning, this one year came up, and he told everyone in French, he's like, okay, the showers have changed. We're not going to shower. Normally, you'd finish these races, and the organizer has some kind of school facility or some kind of gym facility where everybody meets up and showers. Everyone remembers the showers that are in Paris-Roubaix. They still use those. But in the day, they had that same setup for every race. So the soigneur comes in that morning, and he says in French that, hey, we've changed the shower locations. We're going to go down the street at this other gym facility. There's going to be us and maybe 2 other teams. But I end up dropping out, getting in the broom wagon. And then when the broom wagon gets to the finish of the race, my bike was in the broom wagon that went to the finish. I was in another broom wagon that went to the finish. My bike was somewhere else. So I'm walking around trying to find where my team is so I can get to the showers and get warm, because it's freezing cold. And I can't find my team anywhere. So this kid picks me up on a scooter. It's this Belgian kid. He's riding around on a scooter. I get on the back of the scooter, and for 45 minutes, we're driving all over the finish of Flanders trying to find where Frances de Jure showers are. Yeah. And like the race is wrapped up, everything's finishing, and we come back down the finish line again, and all of a sudden I hear my soigneur, and he's yelling at me, Horner, Horner! And I look back and I tap the kid that's driving the scooter, and I remember I'm all kitted up in my FDJ kit, all that stuff.
You're still wearing your shoes?
I'm still wearing my cycling shoes, everything. I am fully kit up as I just got done finishing Tour of Flanders, and I've been riding around on the back of a scooter for 45 minutes. My soigneur sees me. I get off the back of the scooter. Now I'm furious. Like, I'm upset. I'm so mad. It's ridiculous. And I get off the scooter, and I pull my cap off, and I have a pair of Oakleys, and I hand it to the kid on the scooter. And a pair of Oakleys in the 90s, when you handed it to some Belgian kid that owns a scooter that's riding some pro rider around Tour of Flanders, he must have made his day for sure. He's like, man, I had Chris Horner on the back of my scooter. I don't know who this guy is, and he sucks because he didn't finish the race. But I had him on the back of my scooter, and he gave me these Oakleys and this cycling cap. I imagine he still tells that story. And so I get off the scooter, and my soigneur's like, where have you been? I was like, I'm looking for you guys. And he goes, I told you, we're at the showers at a different spot. And of course, I'm like, I don't speak French, remember? And so we're arguing a little bit back and forth. I'm stomping back over to the showers. And he's like, where's your bike? And I said, I don't know where my bike is. It's in the broom wagon somewhere. And later, come to find out, the Belgian driver of the broom wagon that took the bikes, he couldn't find our team either, because it was one of the 2 or 3 teams that moved the location. So he just decided to go to beer or go to the bar, grab a beer, and start getting drunk while he had a few bikes in the back of his van while I was getting bitched out nonstop about not having my bike at the finish of Tour of Flanders.
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, that's classic. See, now that's the kind of story we love here at Pitt. That is, right? That is the essence of what I think we're doing here.
Literally, Richard, and at that point in time, I had been lost so many times at bike races that I couldn't finish, that I would travel with money in my back pocket so that if I couldn't find the team afterwards, I could pull into a bar or something and hang out there. And I knew someone in the bar would know someone in the race that could call someone from my team that could then get directions, and someone would come pick me up. So I never had to use it, but I always had money in my back pocket because I was scared that I would get out there, freeze, And what happens is a lot of guys that can't finish the race, they kind of huddle together, and then there's one Belgian guy that knows exactly where we're going, so you stay with him. But I always worried that you might flat or something, and then they wouldn't wait for me, and you don't have spares, right? Because you're in a bike race, not on a training ride. And so I just brought cash with me to make sure that if I got left behind, I could at least just go grab something warm, a hot tea or something like that at the bar, and wait for my teammates, my team manager, to come pick me up.
That's, you know what, you got it. Tips to surviving the Spring Classic. So let's talk about the course a little bit. So one thing about these Spring Classic races is every single one of them has some defining characteristic that makes it different from the others, even though they're all taking place really in the same part of the world, same weather conditions, part of the same time of season, early season. Tour of Flanders is bergs and cobbles. Cobbled bergs, cobbled climbs. There's around 17 of these cobbled climbs on this course, which is around 260 kilometers, world-class length, as they say. I myself I've been to the Tour of Flanders as a fan. I've ridden the Sportif a couple of times and plunked my way over these things. And of course, it's no problem if I have to walk up the Koppenberg. I could care less because I'm just so happy to be there. It's actually better for me to walk up it so I can soak it in. But for you guys in this race, these climbs, boom, they're coming one after the other into the finale. It really becomes these defining moments. And as we've seen in recent editions, it's really, this is where the battle happens. The last guys who are left who are going to decide this race start to duke it out and start taking big swings at each other on these climbs, and then we sort of see how the race plays out. But tell me, how are you guys as riders approaching a race like this with so many of these climbs in the finale?
Okay, so again, it's a different era for me versus what we're going to see on Sunday. The racing is exploding much quicker than we've ever seen it before, and we don't know exactly when it's going to happen now as fans. Now, on Sunday, that racing could start just like it did last year, where Trek was just lighting things up left and right, and we were halfway into the race when the action was already starting. But for sure, when we talk about Flanders specifically, it's the second half of the race where we see all those 17 bergs and cobblestone climbs and stuff like that start coming into effect. So I don't see it starting unless there's massive amounts of crosswinds. I don't see it starting in the first half.
Yeah, and one thing about those climbs is we've seen that positioning, because they're narrow, there's no room to maneuver on those things. So positioning is really, really critical. So, it's got to be really hell-bent for leather in those kilometers closing in as you starting getting with, I don't know what, kilometer or so out from those climbs.
No, 5K out, no problem. I mean, it could easily start fighting 5K out. When I was doing Flanders in the 90s, I remember coming through some incredibly difficult section of climbing and cobbles, and then we went on to one of the big national roads that went really wide, and the whole peloton went wide and everyone sat up. And when it goes that wide, you're only about 5 deep. Even when we're 200 plus riders, it's still only about 5 deep because the road is so wide. And I'm at the back, but I'm only 5 back from the front, really. Yeah. And so I just remember thinking, it's really nice, it's comfortable. They finally backed off the throttle. And then what happens, we were coming into one of the famous climbs, and it's like you said, it was super narrow, but the pressure started getting put on where they start fighting right away. And if you're not at the front when they make that right turn, you're having to unclip from your pedal and actually wait. And I mean, you can count 10, 20 Mississippi back there before you clip back into your pedal and start going up the climb from almost a dead stop. I mean, you were completely stopped, 1 foot out of the pedal, if you missed the turns. And that's the problem that the young kids had back in my day when you didn't have so much information about when the turns are coming up and how important it is. Now, of course, even a kid that's just starting the race for the first time ever in his career, he's going to understand that, okay, at this point in the race, the climb's starting, his computer's going to show him that's right on his handlebars and stuff like that. So he's not going to miss that kind of information that I had. I mean, remember, we had like an Avocet computer on there that had speed and distance, and that was it.
2 buttons.
Right, 2 buttons, right? 2 buttons, start to stop and change the screen. That's it, man. So it's a different world that they're living in. But as you said, it's crucial. You have to be at the front. Your team has to be at the front. Anyone that watched Ghent saw where Trek were going up the climb before everything started to go all hell bent with something around 90 kilometers to go. where Trek had slowed down everything at the front. They backed off the throttle, and they waited for Jonathan Milan to come back up to the front, and then they started opening up the race again. So those are details that now all of the riders know, and they're sitting in the bus. Remember, when I got there, I was in the back of a station wagon. Now they're sitting in the bus. They got a big screen TV in the front, and the directors are going over the course and the map, and everyone's going to have on their computer downloaded where all the turns are. So it definitely helps for the riders to know where it's at, but it doesn't mean you're going to get there first, right? Because everybody now knows where that turn is. And so if you don't get there, your race is basically over, because the type of effort you have to make after the peloton splits in half, those guys back in the second group are going so hard to get to the first group that effort for 10 minutes of chasing, and it could be as much, if you look at Ghent, they were chasing back there for 50K, 70K before the peloton came back together. So they're, even when you're back on, you're like, oh, I'm back on. It's everything restarts. It's a do-over. It's not a do-over. Your legs are already done. So you get there and you think as a young kid, like, okay, I'm back on. It's good. Everything's fine. No, it's not good, because you just did 50K worth of work back there while the race leader went through that. So you have to know where these climbs are. You have to be there. And if you do get back on after chasing, even for 10 minutes, if you're chasing, your race is over, basically.
You know, one thing I wanted to talk about too is these cobbles. You know, for fans, I remember. Oh yeah, I've done a lot of mountain biking. I've done a lot of riding on a lot of different surfaces when I got there, but I had no idea what these cobbles were really like, and I was astounded riding around in Flanders. Just these are big, giant, rough stones that kind of are double as a roadway or ancient roadway. And trying to ride your bike over these things is. I mean, at the time I was there, I remember riding on 25 mil tires, and I was like, how am I going to get through this thing? And I think now I go back, I'd probably be happy on my 28s, but they are really, really rough. And so you're racing these things as a racer. How are the cobbles for you? How did you feel about those things in Belgium?
All right, well, we go back to our starter conversation. I grew up in San Diego, so I don't know what cobbles were like. I was experiencing them for the first time as I was doing these classic races. And when you get on them, they're just so jarring. And we're going incredibly fast, which smooths out the cobbles a little bit, but it doesn't smooth them out that much. Like, I mean, if a normal cyclotourist gets on there and rides them, they're having a different experience than we are because of the speed we're going over it. But it is so rough, and the bike is bouncing all over the place. The chain is slapping on the frame. A lot of times the chain can bounce off the chain ring, and then you got to get it back on at times too. You see riders having that kind of problem all the time. And so that's how rough it is that everything, your bike's moving all over the place. You just got to let it kind of like bounce underneath you and then let it flow like a little bit. You don't want to fight the bike too much. You just want to put power on the pedals because you want to go as fast as you possibly can. Most of the time you're running a little bit lower RPM so that you can have more power on the pedals and a little bit of you want a little bit of flow to the bike so that it can move a little bit, but you still want to be kind of glued to it at the same time. Sounds counterproductive, but there's a flow to it to get it just right. And then when you come off the cobbles, they were so rough, Richard, that when you come off, you're 100% certain that you have a flat tire because everything is so smooth now. You're like, I must have a flat. So, and you have that, your muscles and your skin have that vibration of shaking like this, where you have that little bit of itchiness feeling is the best way I could describe it. Like that irritation to the skin. It kind of feels like it's itchy, like it's itching right now or something because they're so rough and you're vibrating so much that you have that strange feeling to your skin. So, and then your hands hurt, right? Your hands literally hurt as you get further into the race from each of the cobblestone sections.
There's, I remember that section, riding the Haute Couramment. You get up the hill, but then there's a big, long, like 2 kilometers or something of flat cobbles, and I just remember how rough those were. And I watched the race going on, and I see guys either choosing the gutter or choosing the crown. Did you find when you were riding those things there was it's better here, better there? Was there any kind of technique that you would use to pick the best line in the cobbles?
Again, when I was doing these, because I stopped racing, my last racing as a pro over in Europe was 2014, but they have started to to block off the sides, the smooth parts, so you have to stay on the cobbles. In my day, they didn't block those off, so you always looked for the dirt. I mean, you literally thought, like, okay, there's the pavement, there's the road in the center, I'm going to the right, I'm staying on the dirt. Yeah. So you almost always picked the dirt in my day, and you only rode the crown if you didn't have a choice, if they had too many fans on the side of the road. But if you could pick a gutter, like you're going up one of the bergs that are cobbles, you'd always pick the gutter. But even now, they're trying to close that off oftentimes, or they just got fans standing in there, and then you got to zigzag around it, and you'll see it. We'll see it all the time where they're zigzagging around. Even the blockage cones that they put up, you'll see riders go around it just because it's that much faster and that much easier on the body to be on the smooth part. That's how hard the cobblestones really are. And when you're going up to climb, especially if it's raining and slippery, because remember, I always like to stand on. I was a stander when we get on the climbs. I could stand the whole climb basically, but when you get on the cobblestones, it's too difficult to stand if it's slippery, so you have to sit. And so if you're sitting and it's raining and stuff, it'll control the back tire and give you more traction. But once you go to stand, because say say someone crashed in front of you, and then you're trying to stand because you're in too big of a gear, then the back wheel just slips on the cobbles because they're so slippery too. So it's very complicated for the riders. And when you watch it on TV, it does not do it justice at all how difficult it'd be.
Last week, we talked about San Remo. The parcours there, very long, but smooth roads, and not really considered that challenging a parcours anymore by today's standards. Moving up to Flanders, this is a really different course, different, very hilly, short, sharp, steep climbs on cobbles, a much different style of course. How important is, when it comes to picking a winner, is it the riders making the race, or is the race course making the race? And how important and influential is this course to this race?
Okay, the riders 100% make the course. There's no doubt about that. They are the number one reason, but that's the percentage of how the win comes about. Is the rider, of course, his team, how well organized his team is, how well they back him, and all that stuff. The course certainly has a big time effect. If we compare Flanders to Ghent that just finished, we saw Mathieu van der Poel, of course, lose Ghent to Mads Pedersen. Hopefully that's not a buzzkill for anyone that hasn't watched it. If you haven't watched it, you're a week late anyways. But if you watch Flanders versus Ghent, you see that there's less climbs, of course, in Ghent. The course is lengthwise is 250K in Ghent. We're talking 265, 270, whatever. The distance isn't changing much. It'll be the amount of climbs, the 17 climbs that we have Flanders starting, that will help a rider like Mathieu van der Poel dislodge a rider like Mads Pedersen. And Mads Pedersen, let me be clear, he's probably my third favorite. So he is absolutely a stellar rider. But when we're looking at the top riders, they affect the course for sure. The smaller riders, their teams can have some effect, like we saw last year with Trek playing so hard early at Flanders. So they certainly, the teams and the riders affect everything. The course just makes it easier for the best rider to win when the course becomes more difficult.
Rider physique. Back in the day, a certain physique of rider is built for Grand Tours, a certain physique of rider is built for these one-day classics, and they tend to be bigger guys who historically we've seen do well, the Fabian Cancelaros and Peter Sagans and all those guys. And then last year, Tadej Pogačar wins. He's not a big guy at all, so he kind of threw a wrench into this whole thing. Now, he's not, I don't see him on the start list for this thing.
No, he's not doing it.
The guys are bigger riders with a bigger physique and stature, better suited to these races.
Okay, that part's pretty easy. You just got to grab a tape measure, and you go around the thigh of the leg there, and then do one tape measure around the butt of the rider, and that's where all the power is. And so as the climbs come down, power goes up. And so when we look at these climbs being so short and so much power needed, so much speed going into the climb is needed, and then power for that 30 seconds, 2-minute effort, that's really what's making these one-day classics, the early one-day classics. It'll change once we go to Amstel, Flèche, and Liège. But right now, the earlier flatter classics like Flanders, Paris-Roubaix, the circumference of the rider's leg and the circumference around his butt, where all the power is coming from, will be what decides who the course favors the most, of course.
That makes sense. This would be a good stat for the betting sites is, rider thigh circumference.
Yes, right.
In your betting form.
It's the easiest way to put it so your fans understand it is a bigger leg is more muscle, and more muscle is more power. That's the simplest way to explain it. There's, of course, it's more complicated than that, but the most simplest, easiest way is when you look at these riders and you look at the size of Mathieu van der Poel and how tall he is and how much power he has. That even being taller means you have a more muscle there, carries more oxygen, it produces more power. There's all kinds of reasons, but the simplest is you take the circumference of their leg and then take the circumference of their butt, and that'll tell you why they're able to put out 1,800 watts versus a smaller GC rider can only put out 1,000 or 1,200.
Okay. Well, look, let's talk for a couple minutes here about rider favorites. It looks like just about all of the heavy hitters are going to be on the line for Flanders. We'll be missing Pogačar, which is kind of too bad, but there's so many other guys who are firing and winning races right now. It seems a bit wide open. Who are you liking this week?
Yeah, Van der Poel is the hot favorite. There's no doubt about that. I think even at Ghent, he was the better of all the riders. It was the worst amateur tactics I've watched in a long time. Wow, there's maybe one or two worse amateur tactics I've seen in the years past, but Ghent, the tactics there from Mathieu van der Poel were horrendous at best, but I think he was the strongest. And then, as we already talked about, the course having an effect, I said the riders affect the course mostly, but Flanders is going to make it easier for a rider like Mathieu van der Poel over a rider like Mads Pedersen. But Mads Pedersen does have a strong team backing him up. He's got a lot of good riders there. And then let's not forget the big guy, Wout van Aert, because he's got to be one of the big favorites. We saw him lose over at E3, but he just came out of altitude. That was his first race back. I think we should 100%, I believe, we should see Wout van Aert on exceptional good form here at Flanders. So Wout is going to be the hot favorite. Mathieu van der Poel is the hot favorite. And then, of course, we go Mads Pedersen and a host of other riders below him. Even a rider that won Milan-San Remo, Jasper Philipsen, the teammate of Mathieu van der Poel. This could be ideal if everything was to come back together. We saw him riding good when he won at Milan-San Remo. He's won a Belgium semi-classic since then. Of course, he was in the final group at Ghent. That was just behind the two leaders there. We should see Jasper Philipsen in the group back there, but I don't think he's a big favorite to make it over the climbs with the guys that are hitting. But he's certainly there as one of the sprinters that can come to the line if everything comes back together, which I don't think we'll see. But you look back to Mohoric has to be good for Bahrain Victorious. This is normally, of course, that set him. He's one of the outside favorites for sure. These guys, outside of the top three, though, Mathieu van der Poel, Wout van Aert, these other guys need luck. Or they need tactics to go their way, and they need somebody to flat. They need to not crash. They need to be in the right spot. We always know that there's times there where the big riders will have some kind of bad thing happen to them, a flat or a crash possibly.
If you won the race, whereas most of the other guys have never done that, they're like, I don't know what it's going to be like if I can actually do this. But once you've done that, you've got to have a little bit of a different motivation going into a race. How important or influential is that sort of past knowledge of having won a race versus current form in terms of motivating a rider or getting a rider amped up and to become a player in the finale?
Current form is more important than past winner, but I will say that I did forget that Bettiol is in the race. So with his form, he not because he won in years past, but because he is on form. He won Milan Torino, and then of course when we went to Milan-San Remo, he was on good form there, making it over the climb in the front groups. So Bettiol could come in here. I would put Bettiol, if he's carrying the form from Milan-San Remo, on that same level as Mads. And it was my bad to forget to add him on there, because he's certainly, I think, we got the top two riders, Wout, Mathieu van der Poel, Mads, and then I'll put Alberto Bettiol on there. Being a past winner might help you stay focused in training to get you to this event, and then you're comfortable when you get there. But when you arrive at a race like Flanders, because of the distance of the race, motivation in the race is not going to it's not going to help you win. The motivation in training before the race began, where Alberto Bettiol's training clearly must have been very good before Milan-Torino, where he won, and then, of course, before Milan-San Remo. The motivation that he has to train between Milan-San Remo and here at Flanders will help him be fantastic at Flanders, along with his experience of doing the course a few times. That stuff will all help, but motivation doesn't carry you to a win of a 270-kilometer race.
Well, one thing's for sure, there are a lot of heavy hitters on great form right now, so it should be a really fantastic race.
Yeah, and let's not forget, one last thing before we close up too, let's not forget Julian Alaphilippe had marked this race as his favorite at the early season spring races to be really good here for Soudal Quickstep. He's crashed earlier, but this is what he was marking on his checklist here.
And he had that a couple of years back too, had that fairly nasty crash behind the motorbike. He's got either a revenge ride coming or maybe, it's
revenge, a ton of revenge, right? Revenge for that crash a few years back here at Flanders, and then revenge on Patrick Lefebvre too, who's kind of dissed him, his wife, his family, called him basically an alcoholic and stuff. So there's tons of reason for Julian Alaphilippe to be riding angry. So if there's anybody with a ton of motivation, that's going to be Julian Alaphilippe. And then the question is does he have the form? Because as I said, motivation might keep him focused in the early parts of the race, but he's still going to need form. And the crashes that he had at the earlier spring races here up in Belgium, he might still be feeling the effects of that. So that's an ideal rider, though, if you're talking about motivation. If there's anyone motivated, it's going to be Julian Alaphilippe to get some revenge on Patrick Lefebvre right now, because he wants to sign with a different team, I'm sure, and he wants to leave with some fingers in the air there at Patrick Lefebvre after
that's
all
that.
A
good storyline to be following.
Yeah, so again, we could talk forever, but
I know we could.
People can't listen forever.
Okay, I got to cut this thing off, otherwise I'll never get this edited.
Just let it run through, just like this, just straight through.
We may just have to go live with these things.
I think, yeah, right. Just go live with it.
Forget
100% live, and then post it up later.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay. Well, Chris Horner, thank you so much for joining us for another one of these awesome previews. I'm excited about this race and thrilled and excited to see what you have to say about it after it's done, explaining what happened to us on your channel.
Yeah, the butterfly effect is, you know how it is. I don't hide around the bushes. I just tell it the way it was. And there's some knucklehead moves out there from a lot of guys. So whoever does them, I'll find them and I'll bring them to you guys on the butterfly effect.
All right, Pez fans. Well, that is it. Our preview of Ronde is underway. Keep it dialed to Pez this week. We have got a lot more coming. Our full preview will be on site on Wednesday, Thursday. We've got more stuff coming. Eurotrash, rider comments, all sorts of stuff is happening. And then full race report and coverage on Sunday. Alistair's going to tee us up with some of the best photos of the race from Cobbles. And there's more coming after that. So what a week, what a month it is. The classics are on. Keep it dialed to Pez.
Thanks, Richard. Talk to you soon.